I just want to take another moment to welcome you here to our monthly ancestral healing call. And if you are joining us for this call for the first time, I really look forward to where our conversation will go. If you joined us for the call before, as you already know, we talk about some really interesting things here. And everybody that is a part of this call contributes so much to that. And so I just thank you for taking this time out on your Monday evening to explore this whole topic of ancestral healing and reverence. So I'm Angela Blueskies, and I am an ancestral healing practitioner based in Harpers Ferry, West Virginia, but I call the greater Washington, D.C. area home. And I always look forward to engaging in this conversation because there's a lot of interest in ancestral work at this point. People are more interested than ever than I've ever known in my life, at least, in exploring genealogy and DNA testing and really learning where we're from. And especially in North America, we're a culture of people from all over the place. Like some of us have Native ancestry and some of us have European or African ancestry or Asian ancestry. And it's super interesting to come to this bigger question of who are we as a sum of all of our beautiful parts. And so tonight, our theme for this call is going to be to talk about boundaries and belonging. And before we get started, I just want us to take a moment and get centered because most everybody, I'm sure, has had a full day already. And it'll just help us to be able to hear and explore a little bit more deeply. So if you would please let yourself get comfortable where you are and let your eyes close. And just take a moment to let yourself settle. And if your feet are touching the floor, really bring your awareness there to that point of connection with the earth. And if your feet are not touching the floor, bring your attention to where you're sitting, really feeling that support. And begin to connect with the breath, feeling it moving in and out of the body. And taking these next few moments just to see what it feels like to be you today. And I'll open our space with a prayer. I want to begin by just offering gratitude for this opportunity for us to be together today and to come to connect with this beautiful topic, ancestral healing, ancestral reverence. And what does that mean in contemporary culture? What does that mean when so many of us have lost our connection with our ancestral ways and maybe even lost connection with our knowledge of who our ancestors are? And I ask that our time together today be interesting and inspiring and encouraging for each of us on our path. I call the elders, the masters, the teachers, the wise ones, the guides, the guardians, and our radiant, well grandmothers and grandfathers, our ancestors. Join us in this space and help us to navigate this conversation with grace and wisdom. And for this, we thank you. And so when you feel ready, go ahead and let your eyes open and bring yourself back into the room. Hopefully you're feeling a little more present. And it looks like we've had a few more people join the call since we began, and I just want to welcome all of you. And so I just want to begin our call tonight with a reading from a beautiful book that I have been enjoying these last few months. And I'm reading it very slowly so that I don't read it and then it's over. And I will show you the cover of this book. Some of you may already know it. It's called Belonging, Remembering Ourselves Home by Tokopa Turner. And she speaks a lot about the ways that we've lost ourselves through losing our cultures. And so I just want to share a little bit of her words from early in this book. She says, Westerners have forgotten what indigenous people understand to be cardinal, that this world owes its life to the unseen. Every hunt and every harvest, every death and every birth is distinguished by beauty making and ceremony for that which we cannot see, feeding back that which feeds us. I believe our alienation is the felt negligence of that reciprocity. And she goes on to say, as we come to understand the symmetry between the outer landscape and the inner wilderness, we can't help but grieve the ways in which our own nature has been tampered with, denigrated, broken into obedience, and in many cases eradicated from memory. We begin to face the ways in which we are complicit in this slow apocalypse, within and without. Only from such a place of loss and longing can we begin remembering ourselves home. And so her words are so potent to me because she really speaks to something that I know that I've experienced, and most of the clients that I work with also have experienced in their lives. And I would imagine that each of you would have something to contribute to that conversation too. And that thing that is missing is our sense of deep and enduring connection to where we're from, not just the family of origin that we're born into or the family that we have been adopted by, not only in the town where we live and the home that we call our place of residence, but deeper than that, in our bones and in our deep knowing in the soul, like, where am I from? And I see these questions coming up more and more within spiritual communities as people are really trying to figure out how to live in a culture of, I like to think of it almost like a culture of orphans, because we've lost our ways, we've lost our traditions, and the traditions that we've created in their place seem a bit shallow and empty. So I just want to open up a moment for conversation for anyone who would like to contribute. And the question that I would like to propose is, what does belonging mean to you? So when you are ready to jump in, please unmute yourself and jump in.
It's Kelly. I guess I'll go first.
Thank you, Kelly.
For me, belonging is having a sense of community, a sense of tribe, so to speak, a sense of support that goes, both ways. Something I could need or something that I could provide for someone else is belonging to me.
Beautiful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is Regina. Can you hear me?
Absolutely, Regina.
Okay. My understanding of belonging is having a foundation um, where you could gain knowledge from and having a sense of, I don't want to use the word belonging, but having a sense of like a guide as to how you're supposed to live. Like you belong to um, a certain set of beliefs. So therefore you have to do this like a guide.
I love that. Thank you, Regina. I think that's really important. And those codes of how to live certainly have been established in most original cultures. And though they exist in our culture today, at least in the United States, it seems that that's something that is in the process of being maybe broken apart and hopefully revisioned for the better. Thank you so much for your ideas. Rika, would you like to go next?
Yes, I wanted to say like a sense of connection and accountability. So if you guys are on the same vibration or you belong, you fit in, there's no need for judgment. No one thinks they're better. You're kind of on the same wavelength, and that connection that comes from it. But if I'm going back to certain ways, or if I said I was going to do something, and there I have someone there to hold me accountable. So that connection, someone that can relate.
I love it. Thank you, Rika. That's beautiful. Would one more person be willing to share?
Hi, I think that for me, belonging brings a sense of security. So knowing that you're held and um, kind of like Rika said, I can be me, not better or worse than anybody else. I can present my whole self and still belong. And there's a security in that.
I love it. Such beautiful ideas all. And hopefully we all have experienced this sense of belonging in some way, whether through family of origin or family of choice, or through communities that are supportive and nurturing and that provide acceptance. And I know that for me, when I started to engage with my ancestors, I wasn't even really sure what was happening. And it was a different sense of belonging that felt maybe almost a little imaginary, as in most of our culture today, these kind of practices are so lost, that most people are so attached to the rational mind, and the ways that we're taught to believe things are real or not is through, can I see it? Can I prove it? And certainly connection with ancestors are not something that we're taught to even look for. But for me, when I started to really connect with ancestral healing work after my father died, I I began to see the threads that wove me together, the threads of traditions I had never had living exposure to, but that were still showing up in my life, um, and through ways of engaging with the world. Through, for me, it was connection with nature and connection with creativity. And it was enough to call me very, very deep. And I am so grateful for my practices of ancestral reverence and ancestral healing, because it's really helped me to find my place in my life and in the world. And in our contemporary culture that reveres all things independence and individual, like those things are wonderful. It's good for us to be, firmly rooted in our own ideas and self-actualizing. but it's also really important to know the bigger whole of which we are a part. And for me, it was kind of a relief when I started to really connect with my ancestors, because it helped me to see that I didn't have to create everything from scratch, that I was actually just the living face of my ancestors finding my way in this world in this time. And so I thought it might be really interesting to begin our conversation with what does it even mean to be in relationship with our ancestors? And I'm curious if any of you have already engaged in any ancestral reverence or relational practices that you might be willing to share a bit about.
I have an ancestral altar, per se. It's pretty much a makeup table, really, but I don't use it for makeup. So I have pictures of a few ancestors that I have had a relationship with, and most of the pictures have me in it with them. So I have things that either they used to like or that reminds me of them, and I have that right there for me to look at, whenever I feel like it. And if I have something I want to say, I'll say it. If I want to say hi, I say hi. So it's just to hold the memories and that connection that way.
So it's like an ancestor altar. Is that how you see it?
Yes.
That's beautiful. Do you have any practices where you make offerings there, or you change it or anything?
I have done the offerings in the past. Like I have a small bottle of what's in it? It's some brown alcohol. It's a small bottle as an offering. I had some tobacco that I had put into a small bowl as an offering. I didn't light it. I just put it there. I have some coins or something. I have some seashells. One of my grandparents liked seashells. So just little things like that.
That's great. And when did you start doing this? Like, how did it come to you, and when did you begin this practice?
I started it maybe a year ago. I noticed that my mom had always done it. She had it set up with like maybe obituaries or something like that, or pictures of loved ones and seashells and things. I was like, I have some pictures, and let me put this down. Let me have my own little section. So I may light a candle. I used to put like an apple or something there, and then whenever it would look sad, I would replace it with another apple. So it's just whatever I felt like it that day, I just did it. I may have burned ancestral, what is the ancestor money in a clay pot. So I just got it from Amazon. I prayed over it. I blessed it. I do Reiki. So I may have said a prayer. I'm like, here you go.
I love it. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing, Rika. Kristen.
Hello.
Hello.
I was trying to see if you could see my little altar over there. So I have a little altar. He's right now I've got a few things up here that are representing some current relationships that I have, that I'm asking for the brothers and the fathers and the men's side of my lineage and part of my blood, and just everybody that's from the beginning, and all the tribes and everyone, to just support in the relationships that I'm nurturing and working on at the moment. And I've been really called to lighting candles, and almost like having an open conversation when I do my opening prayer work in the morning. I go around and I say hello to all the directions, and then sometimes names come to me and I say hello, and I thank them for being still part of my life, and whether they're here physically, but that they're there still spiritually. And that they've been a big part of my life recently, of just being aware. And it's almost like a two-way conversation, as odd as it sounds. It's sort of like, I might put out some prayers to them, and then I'll hear a song later on in the day, and I'm like, thank you. Or, there's something else that will happen that will be confirmation that they're there. And that's who I think of as community. With me moving around and not having my sense of like community physically, I'm tapping into my ancestors right now to just be home with them at the moment.
I love it. And when did you begin connecting with ancestors in your life?
That I was through the shamanic apprenticeship probably 10 years ago. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. It's a good team to have on your back.
It
You
certainly
know?
is.
It really is. Like I finally have found, like I've always wanted this skull, like a crystal skull, as I just want to like water it and, you know, have something physical. Like, I mean, I have pictures and some things that represent my, you know, ancestors, but I've wanted like a little crystal skull so I can pour water and, you know, ancestral fire powder or, you know, whatever it is that I'm being called to offer.
That's great. I
Yeah.
love it. Especially love the skull image. That's one that is very strong for me too.
Yeah, it's very easy to look at and be like, wow, it's anything, because all our skulls are the same. It's, you know, the men, the women, the fathers, the sons, the, you know, it can be everybody. It's just the energy of everybody.
I love it. Thank you, Kristen.
Welcome.
So one of the questions that I often get when I'm in conversation with people about ancestors is connected to the ones that you wouldn't necessarily want to call present, because I think most of us probably have at least one person in our family that's the one that we would like to not engage with because it doesn't feel safe, or it makes us feel terrible, or maybe there's some deeper situation that happened that would make you not want to engage with that person ever again at all. And I totally honor that. I totally get that. I have certainly had situations in my own family where I've needed to create space. And if someone told me that, you know, you can connect with your ancestors and you can bring healing to your ancestors, I would have probably said, no, thanks, I'm good. And so I've met people as I travel around and teach that have definitely said the same thing. And so it's something that I wanted to bring to this conversation tonight as well. The sense of belonging that we can get from connection with our ancestors is profound and beautiful, and something that many of us are missing and longing for. But having appropriate boundaries with ancestors that are not the ones we want to connect with is also something that's really important. And I think too, in doing ancestral healing work, specifically lineage healing, it's possible that there are some ancestors that are really well and good that you would want to connect with, and there are other ancestors that are maybe not well and good that you would not want to connect with at all. And so in the approach that I practice, boundaries are super important, and also the agreement that it is not the individual living person's responsibility to take on the pain or the heaviness or the issues or traumas of any lineage in our lives now. It's not required to do that in order to bring healing for the ancestors. In fact, the most important thing that I've learned through this work is that we can't actually, as living people, heal the ancestors. We can only ask for the healing to happen and then make offerings and engage with the process with a well ancestor to do it. And so boundaries are an essential part of it, and especially once you open a lineage for healing, through relationship with a well guide, usually quite far back on the line, like before remembered names, before, maybe even before like historical documentation. It can be thousands of years ago when we connect with well ancestors. And it's important through that relationship to know that you're connecting with someone that you're very safe with. And so in the process of doing ancestral healing work, especially when it's entire lineage healing, it's important to vet that ancestor well and say, are you an ancestor and not just some random spirit presence that's showing up? Once you know that this person is definitely an ancestor, you find out, are you able and willing to help with the healing of this line? And a lot of times, well ancestors will say, oh my God, thank God, somebody's finally showed up in the living world that can say, let's do this. I've been waiting, maybe for hundreds or thousands of years. And then the final question would be to make sure that that person is well and in good relationship with all the ancestors before. It is absolutely possible to have a single well ancestor or even a few single well ancestors on a lineage. For example, when my father died, I went to a ritual ancestralization to make sure that he crossed over well and that he would be held by the ancestors himself. And that ritual was beautiful, and it was an important process. It lasted about 5 days. And at the end of it, I knew that my father was good. I could feel it, and I had done so many offerings and practices to ensure it. But I started to wonder then, what's before that? What's happening before that? And knowing that we're all interconnected in this world, we're also interconnected with all of those who've come before us. And so if, like, for example, if I know that there were problems in my mother's life, and my mother knew that there were problems in her mother's life, you keep going back through the generations and start to uncover some of the things that may have been the problems. Like, speaking of women's lines right now specifically, like, were women oppressed in really violent ways? Were they abused? Were they raped? Endless different possibilities for the kinds of suffering that can happen, especially if someone is of European ancestry, where these ancestors burned during the witch trials. So for people of African ancestry, were your ancestors like imported to the New World as slaves? These are the kind of things that obviously play out through our culture and obviously play out through our lives. But in doing ancestral healing work, it's possible to safely move back through time and to start to see how some of that happens. Now, a few months ago, we had a beautiful sister that joined the call and spoke of her own African ancestry and her hesitation to engage. And that is something that I completely understand and respect, because there is so much to deal with. And in terms of cultural wounding and cultural traumas, you can look in any different direction and find immense suffering that has happened in the past for our ancestors. And that suffering is passed down through the lineages in various ways and eventually lands in our laps if nothing is done about it. But the same kind of thing can happen in individual families. Like, maybe there was some kind of rift that happened in the past, or some kind of abuse that was happening in the past. It becomes a pattern that can be passed down generation after generation. And as I've done this work, I've observed that sometimes the original pain is forgotten, but the pattern of relating to one another stays the same. And over time, this can become very toxic and very confusing. So in my mother's lineage, as I was doing repair on this line, I connected with a very strong guide, a guide that was the energy of lightning and thunder and earthquakes, very strong, fierce, feminine energy that was all about destruction in order to create renewal. And I very much related with that. And she was able to show me very far back in time, maybe even 1,000 years or more, the relationship that broke down between a mother and a daughter when the mother said, it's not safe for you to embrace your gifts, the intuitive gifts that you may have, or we might call them psychic gifts that you have. So I'm going to tell my daughter that she's wrong when they start to manifest, that she's making it up, she's a liar. And I'm going to make it so clear that she can't express that she will not ever be killed for having that as her gift that shows up in a culture that doesn't understand or honor it. And so that rift between mother and daughter began there and was passed down through the generations. The message was, the mother gives this information to the daughter then loses trust for the mother and trust for herself, because she can't believe what is showing up in her is real and true. And so I tracked this down through generations, generation after generation. The original wound is forgotten, but that distrust between mother and daughter continued, and that distrust of oneself continued. As I see it in recent generations in my own family, it manifested as mental illness. And just imagine the kind of wound it is to have intuitive knowing about others in the world showing up in your life and being told that you're lying, but to see the absolute like reflection of that right in front of you. I don't know how I got lucky enough to be able to express these things and to do this work without those kind of stigmas in my own existence. And I know that that's a blessing. But in the recent generations before me, it was not something that could happen. And the level of toxic relationship between mother and daughter was so profound that I absolutely hesitated to ever begin working on that lineage. And now I have to say that I am so grateful that I did, because my mother finally passed this past June. And though our relationship face to face was never able to be healed, after she passed, I was able to continue working with the ancestors to make sure that she was received well after she died. And it was truly amazing to see how quickly she has moved into wellness as I've continued to do that journey work. So what an amazing blessing. Boundaries are essential. Boundaries are essential because they make sure that we do not have to engage with anything that feels toxic or scary or traumatizing. And sometimes the ancestors themselves create boundaries so that we don't even have to see that stuff. I've definitely worked with people who have really big traumas in their ancestral past, like people who are of African descent who have unbelievable wounding through having come from families that were in the slave industry. And I've also worked with people from the Middle East who have, I can't even imagine the kinds of things that have been going on there for so many years. And these kind of things, a lot of times people just say, oh, I don't want to go there. I don't want to think about it. Don't want to look at it. Don't want to talk about it. And the ancestors say, I will not show you what will cause you harm. You don't need to see it. You don't need to know the story of it. And sometimes they even send you away like, we got this, you can go now. Which I think is really good, because the essence of doing any kind of healing work is to show up to see what really needs to be seen and to witness what needs to be witnessed for the sake of healing, but not to cause further harm. And in this work, the ancestors seem to have that going for them. And it's also something that this modality that I practice has kind of built into it. It is not necessary to work with those things. And it is still possible to understand the bigger picture of what happened and to move through the healing of it and to clear those things that are so toxic and damaging. And I think especially for people who have children or hope to have children, it's a wonderful thing to know that you can clear these things so that those children won't have to carry it any longer. So I'm going to pause there for a moment to see if there's any questions or any comments that anyone would like to contribute to this conversation. Hi, Kristen.
Hi. I just thought, you've just touched on something really, I think, important that people, I don't know, like sometimes we think that it would like to heal who our relationships are in our moment and in our time. And sometimes those people aren't able to do that and meet us where we are. And that we're left stranded like, well, I want to work on this, but they're not talking to me. And how do I get them to do this with me? And I want to take care of it. And it's so important to work on that for yourself with your ancestors. But how cool is that to be able to carry that, on with your mom, like later on? Like I think of that as it's going to happen with one of my family members, that we'll be able to have a better relationship and really understand each other when she's not in our physical realm.
Yeah. When I realized that there was no clear possibility of bringing healing between myself and my mother, I was pretty devastated, because I literally think that everything that I have chosen along my path for healing, every modality I've ever learned and every kind of modality I've ever approached for my own healing work, in the background, the message was, maybe this will fix it. Maybe this will heal our relationship. Maybe if I do enough different kinds of work, something will eventually plug in all the way. And the most humbling and important thing that I learned was that the living are sovereign. We each, during our lifetime, have full choice in how we choose to be in the world. And we can't change each other. We have to agree to change together or not.
Right.
And I had to accept that with my mother. And so for the last almost 3 years of her life, I didn't have any contact with her. And it brought me immense heartache. But I knew that it was the right thing. I knew that there had to be a boundary there, even with the living. And when she did die, I immediately went into ritual, and we had a memorial service for her in my home a few weeks later, that everyone participated in, like praying for her to move through to a place of wellness, because she experienced so much suffering in her life, physically, mentally, and emotionally. And I don't even know the whole story. And honestly, I think a lot of times in those kind of toxic family dynamics, we can't know the whole story. Yeah, I wish you so much good work as you navigate your situation, Kristen.
Yeah, it was such a powerful thing where I was like, oh, I've done all this work. I've been to Peru. I've done this, and I've worked on this, and I feel really good, and I feel positive, and then she just couldn't like meet. It's like she was just still holding on to so much, and I was like, oh, I feel so bad for you. like I can we can work on this if you want. And it was just big walls, but it was nice to know that I did all that I could do for us.
Yeah. I know that when I was working on that lineage, like I would bring, as the lineage itself would heal, I would bring down this really strong, bright, well energy, and I would send it to all the living, anybody who is connected by blood relation to this lineage. May they be blessed if they choose to receive it. And the energy I always felt from my mother was, nope.
Yeah,
it was almost like an umbrella,
yeah.
like keeping it away. And I was like, that's okay. I love you anyway. And
Yeah.
I hope that you find the peace that your heart needs and longs for. And if we can't do that face to face in this lifetime, that's all right. Thank you, sister.
Welcome.
So do you actually do like shamanic healing with the journeys to help to heal lineages, or how do you go about getting that information?
That is a great question. I don't typically use like shamanic drum journeying to do it for myself, or when I'm working with people one-on-one. When I'm working with groups, the drum journeying usually helps people to drop in the fastest. But I have a process that I work with that helps to guide people into a state of trance, even though most of the time people wouldn't even picture it. Like it doesn't look like trance that we see in movies and TV. But it's a deeper, more intuitive state in which we can receive information, and the structure of the process helps people to be able to do that. And I have to say that I've been doing this work for a few years now, and I've only had maybe one circumstance in which somebody couldn't directly connect through that process. And in the work that I'm doing, like I'm a facilitator, but I am not the one seeing the ancestors on your lineage or doing that work on your behalf. I'm literally your guide through a process that helps you to see your people and to listen to your people and to create boundaries with your people when necessary and to bring that healing through. And that's actually something that was really important to me as I sought ways to do this work, because so much of everything is anchored in giving away our power to somebody else who is able to do the thing. And for me, like the message that my guides have given me for years is, yes, you could learn to do it for them. You could do that. But the more important thing is to give people the tools to be able to do that healing themselves. Then it's empowering, and then it lasts. It's not like, oh, I just went to a shaman or a healer and they did this beautiful thing for me, but now I'm kind of back in the same place. When people are empowered to see and know for themselves, like I ultimately want to render myself unnecessary so that you can connect directly.
You read my mind, because that's exactly where I was going, because I went to a shaman and this is what she told me. And now it's about the decoding process. And what do the symbols mean? And what does this mean? And what do you mean about this one? And who's the Indian? And so it's like, it still leaves you in a place where now I'm going back down another rabbit hole. So I just, I wanted to see the difference in the process.
Yeah. And what I love is that, and the way that I facilitate this work is literally helping you to create direct relationship with your own well ancestors, so that you can ask them, if you're getting symbols and you're like, why am I seeing a dove? Or what does a fork mean? Or something random. You don't need to ask anybody else but them. And by creating a direct relationship with them that feels trustable and safe, it's possible you get those answers yourself. And I feel like as people engage with their ancestors, it boosts that intuition, that sense of connection. And sometimes it's crazy, you know, like we were talking about offerings before, and my ancestor altar is right beside of my desk here. So I'm going to show you something that my maternal grandmother asked me for a year ago, which still amuses me to this day. It was her birthday, and I always want to do ancestral offerings on my ancestors' birthdays. And I was just I was actually just sitting here at my desk working on something else, and I was like, all right, what would you like me to offer you? And the smell of spearmint came into the room. There's no spearmint anything here. And so my grandmother used to chew free dent gum. She was a dentures wearer, and it was the thing that she wanted. And I said, are you serious? You don't want like sage or a glass of wine, like some beautiful flowers? No, she wanted free dent gum. And I said, gosh, do they even make that anymore? And I went out in search of it, and I found it, and I put it right on my ancestor altar where it remains. And I don't know, I think that just cracks me up, because we can learn to have those relationships, and sometimes they're really serious, like you need to do a week of prayer about the certain thing, or you need to go make an offering at the base of a tree. And sometimes it's like, I miss chewing gum, which cracks me up. I love it. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Rika?
No, that was it.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Hi, this is Lizette.
Hi, Lizette.
So I'm very new to the ancestral journey. I do do my tradition of Dia de los Muertos. So every year I do the whole altar and say prayer and welcome the past loved ones, family and friends that have passed over the years. For me, I don't know much of my ancestors. My grandmother, my maternal grandmother, and my maternal great grandmother both have passed. My dad's side of the family, I don't know very well at all. So I don't have knowledge. So sometimes I feel kind of lost, like, where do I begin? I don't know a whole lot. And my mother, she's open, but my family's so diverse in their lineage. Like they have a hard time even trying to track which way everything goes, I guess you can say. So I guess that's just kind of where, like, coming to this and just trying to figure out, like, where do I begin? How do I even begin with the limited knowledge with what I have, which is very, very limited.
I think that's super common. My first question would be to ask you, are there any living relatives that maybe have more information?
Maybe my aunt, but I know she's been working on the family tree per se. So she would probably be the one. And so I would have to reach out to her.
If that's something that feels supportive, it can be really cool to, like, I right beside of my desk, actually, I keep it near to me at all times. I have not something as pretty as a family tree, but literally just a list of the names of family members and the known years of them. And I separated it by, you know, mother's line, mother's father's line, father's mother's line, father's father's line, and then back from there. And so it gives me great pleasure to be able to just say their names. But sometimes people can't find that information. And I've certainly even worked with people who are adopted who don't know anything about their blood lineage ancestors at all. And I think the thing that is good to know is that the spirit side of the work, as opposed to like the genealogical side, doesn't require you to actually know that much. If you have your parents' names, that's good. If you know where they were born, that can be good. If you have your grandparents' names, that can be good. But a lot of times people don't even have all of their grandparents' names, and that's okay. In the approach that I am working with, I am connecting way, way back beyond remembered names anyway. And so the first step, in the process that I work with is to assess the primary lineages, which are those 4 that I just mentioned, and then to just see kind of what's going on. And it's important to do that in a way that has good boundaries, because you never know what you're going to see. And from there, once you have assessed it, it's kind of like I say to clients sometimes, like, it's like going to the dentist. You can't just fix a tooth before you know what's going on in your mouth as a whole. And so the assessment is important because it helps you to know what's going on in the lineage as a whole through direct sight and connection. And then from there, you make connection with an old well guide that can help you to navigate the rest of the process in a way that is safe and graceful and also thorough. I think too much of the time these days, especially in spiritual communities that fall under kind of the New Age name, people rush to thinking that everything is good. Everything is love, everything is light, everything is bright, everything is intrinsically whole and well already. And while that all sounds really good in terms of ancestor work, it is largely not true. We haven't been tending our ancestors for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And the things that are the problems that we inherit in our own lives have been going on for a while. And so ancestral healing helps to address that in a way that is more safe. Does that answer your question, Lisette?
Yes, it does. And I guess the boundaries is kind of where I was a little worried because I don't know the history. Like I hear bits and stories of family and being from, so I come from a Mexican background, and my lineage goes all the way into European blood as well. So there's just so much, like I said earlier, I got so much diverse in our family line and our family lineage. And so I guess the boundaries is kind of like, I don't really know it, like stories. So I guess like I said, was the boundaries, because I do understand on a spiritual level, there might be stuff that I don't want to see or know, and I guess that's just kind of where, I'm like, where do I begin? So, yeah.
And Lisette, you're leading me right into the exercise I wanted to close this call with. That is all about how to make sure that your boundaries are good and that you clear anything heavy. So I want to thank you for intuitively leading us in that perfect direction. So I would like to invite everyone to let yourself get comfortable in your space again and close your eyes. And if you have had a busy day engaging with other people or environments that are not your ideal environment, this can be a really good practice to do in that kind of situation as well. But it can be especially good to do in the context of any kind of energy healing work, and especially ancestral healing work as well. So again, letting your feet connect with the floor or feeling your body connect with your seat. And connecting with the breath. And relaxing the body if you notice tension in any particular place. And just take a moment, starting with the top of your head, moving down towards your feet. And I'd like to invite you to just scan through to see if you perceive any imbalances in yourself, any place that feels tight or uncomfortable, or just like something is not quite right in the way that you would prefer it to be. Just notice for now, no need to try to shift anything. And sometimes as people imagine boundaries and clearing energy, there's this image of pushing it away. And sometimes that can be effective, but it's not the only approach. And so this is an approach that can help to clear things out of your system energetically that may be causing you a little bit of heaviness. And so I want you to imagine a screen, like a window screen, above your head. And we're going to slowly let this screen move down and through the entire body, catching anything that needs to be filtered out, moving at your own pace, and really trying to be aware not only of seeing and visualizing this, but actually sensing and feeling it in your body. And once the screen gets all the way to the soles of your feet, ask that all of the heaviness that has been cleared from you return to Mother Earth. In my tradition from the Andes of Peru, it is believed that Pachamama receives all of our heaviness as fertilizer for new growth. And so just take a moment to notice how you feel having moved this screen through your system. And now I want to invite you to imagine an egg-shaped sphere surrounding your body, extending out as far as 3 feet in every direction around you, as well as above and below. And this can quite literally be a boundary that you create around yourself anytime you need. With each exhale, imagine this sphere be filled with a brighter and brighter energy. And if you would enjoy this energy being a particular color that brings you joy, that's fine too. And so continue for another few moments, filling this bubble, this sphere of energy, making it as bright and strong as you need. So if you choose to engage on your own with ancestral healing work, I would encourage you to try some practices like these to clear your own heaviness and any heaviness you may be carrying first. And then to really create this protective space around you, knowing that it is yours and it is sovereign. And at any point, if you still feel like there are ancestors or energies trying to enter into your space, you can imagine a little dial inside your sphere where you can turn it up a notch. With some clients, I even have them put it 1 through 10 on the dial so that they can choose the level of protection they feel like they need in the moment. And this is usually sufficient to really keep a sense of protection around them as they're engaging with things that may not be comfortable. So take another moment basking in this bright protective energy. And knowing that this exercise is always available to you, even when you're in an environment that may not feel like a natural environment for doing this kind of thing. No one else will ever know. And it may really help you to keep your energy protected and to not engage with things that may feel intrusive. And as we come to the end of this meditation, I want to invite you to start letting go of this protective boundary, letting the energy start to dissipate. And just take a few more moments with the breath, noticing how you feel. And so I just want to take a moment and offer gratitude to all the elders, masters, teachers, wise ones, guides, guardians, and especially our radiant, well grandmothers and grandfathers, our ancestors, for being with us in this space, for being with us in this conversation, for helping us to open to new ideas and to step into greater responsibility, for being in relationship with those who've come before us, and asking good questions about how to do that well for both ourselves and for all our people. And I ask that each one who has been with us tonight may be brightly and wildly supported as they continue to walk the path of healing and personal growth and exploring what it means to be in relationship with the ancestors. And for this time we've had together, and all of the beautiful gifts that our ancestors bring us every single day of our lives, even when we're not aware, we thank you.